Okay.
Okay. I think we're good
Well,
now.
yeah. Well, Jason Cleere is a faculty member in the Department of Animal Science at the Texas A&M University, and here he is here to talk about livestock losses due to the 2023 drought and heat. Go ahead, please.
Good deal. Thank you guys for having me here, and I apologize. I have another meeting. I live in Madisonville, Texas, work off of campus, but I have another meeting just east of here, so I was going to Zoom or do this from home, and the electricity went out a few minutes ago. So fortunately, I have a cell phone that was able to link to it. So it is a little dark in my house because of that, but hopefully we can make it through this. Yeah, this year was a very interesting year, and I appreciated Brianna's presentation there because it kind of queued up some things that, as I was putting this presentation together, it really had me kind of scratching my head somewhat on the drought monitor and different things. But that the first slide that we see there, that picture, I've been playing around a little bit with AI generated images, and I put in 2023 Texas drought. The first image I got was a group of cows and cracked ground, but they were all skin and bones. And I thought, well, that really wasn't appropriate picture, and that really wasn't realistic. But the picture that I finally settled with, this drawing that was AI generated, kind of summed up this year. Though it was really dry, it was exceptionally hot, and cattle were looking for any place they could to try to cool off with that. And so it was a challenging year, to say the least. Our challenge, just specifically in the Brazos Valley area around Texas A&M, if you look at as we got into July, August, and September, we had 69 days over 100 degrees. I don't know how many were just right under 100. And then 29 days over 105 degrees during that period of time. And in the evenings were exceptionally hot as well. And so, as Brianna said, with that, there were, quite a bit of stress on the cattle, but more importantly, we kind of, and I hadn't heard that term before, but we had heard that it had a flash drought per se. We, for most ranchers, as we were in late May, we were extremely optimistic because it looked like we were going to get some great hay cuttings early on, and some producers did. There was grass growing, and then about the end of May, the faucet cut off. And then as we got into June, it started heating up, which is expected in Texas this time of year. But the faucet remained off, and then it got exceptionally warm. Uh, and so, as you look at some of the differences, and Brianna showed some of those differences from the standpoint of temperatures and stuff. But I think the big difference between 2022 and 2023 was certainly the extreme temperatures over that 90 days without any rain. And so then we got quite a bit of evaporation. And so, I pulled up July 18th, 2023 on the drought monitor, and then fast forwarded to September 12th. And, you can see how things, according to the drought monitor, changed rapidly with that. Now, that's the question I had as I began to really study this, and I hadn't gone back and looked at those drought monitors um, over time for this 2023 drought until I was putting this presentation together. It was exceptionally dry. And if you looked at conditions in the eastern portion of the state, east of I-35, the drought of 2023 from a livestock production and forage production would have been more extreme than 2022. Just looking at production conditions, what we were experiencing over here when producers were having to start feeding hay, those types of scenarios. But when we went back and I looked at these drought monitors and I looked at July 18th, and we had folks that were already feeding hay in mid-July, and that would including me on my personal operation as well. And again, by September, we were much, the drought monitor was more reflective of what we had. And then as we move into December now, we did get some rains in the fall and grew some winter pastures and stuff, which helped our producers. And we grew some hay crop, a little bit of hay crop. But I guess the question that I had, because of this drought, with the extreme temperatures that we had, did the drought monitor accurately represent what happened in Texas this year? Because we had such extreme temperatures, and we talk about that soil moisture. It was almost, if you look at the drought monitor, everything was delayed. They were behind schedule on that. So, if you look at, I guess to me as a producer, rancher, and A&M faculty member, my concern is that, if indeed, as we look towards the future and climate and change, and if we are going to get some of these flash droughts, do we need to have more accurate methods to portray what is really happening, from a drought standpoint, from a evaporation rate, those types of things. So I'm just going to throw that out. I thought that was very interesting as I was digging through some of this data. And really, again, we didn't get into the extreme drought in our part of the state until we got into the 1st of September. And we were already, if you look at boots on the ground, mid-July and August, it was burnt to a crisp, and we had cracks 2 inches wide in areas. And so, I don't know. I guess that's a question that I had that, that's above my expertise from a standpoint. I'm more on the production side, but I felt that was pretty interesting, and that's why I discussed it a little bit. I had a audience here with the Texas Water Research Network. So, as far as cattle death losses to the extreme heat, the actual death losses were minimal. It was probably the losses were more isolated to ranches that were calving in July, August, and September, which we highly encourage. And most of our ranchers do not calve during those periods of time in Texas because it is extremely hot. And from a production standpoint, those calves, we found through research, the weaning weights are always significantly less on summer-born calves. But we do have some ranchers in some specialty type scenarios, club calf operations, 4-H, and so on, do calve in July, August, and September. And those were the ones that probably struggled, and we had some death losses, minimal with that for sure, but not a really huge impact from the standpoint of the heat or the drought causing those death losses. There were some reports of some abortions tended to be maybe higher than normal. But a lot of it's kind of hard to pinpoint on the extreme heat without enough data, and that's hard to come by. But the one thing that we did see as far as the impact on was bull fertility. And from a standpoint of when we see those extreme, over 100-degree days, it usually takes about 60 days for those damaged sperm to clean out that are stored in a bull. And so we've had producers that were trying to test bulls in October that were still getting some fertility issues, and those bulls had to be put on hold. So, again, there's some isolated scenarios with that. The cattle were not impacted as much as we expected. As you look at some ranches that I work with, and just talking with producers, surprisingly, on those late winter springborn calves, the weaning weights were good, and cow body condition was still good as well, with those ranchers that were supplemental feeding into the summer. There were some
Minutes.
reports of lower than expected pregnancy rates, in first calf heifers, which anytime there's some major stresses, the breedbacks can be a challenge there. So the cattle impacts seem to be not as much as we may have thought they could have been. The real economic losses from cow-calf and the rancher's perspective was the result of lack of forage production. Pastures, whether it be, native pastures in Central Texas or improved pastures in East Texas, they just weren't fully recovered from the 2022 drought. And as a result of that, some ranchers had to begin feeding hay in July. The interesting thing is that the Panhandle and up into the Rolling Plains had a really good May and June, and they grew a lot of grass, and it didn't seem to be as tough of a drought for them, which is the exact opposite of what normally happens in Texas. Usually far west Panhandle is always seems like the start of the droughts with it, but they grew a lot of forage, so that was a little bit different this year. Hay production was there was a little bit early on, but it was limited. As a result, hay prices were in that $200 to $300 a ton, or roughly $100 to $150 a round bale, which is exceptionally high for forage. And some of the reasons for that was that there was no residual hay inventory from the 2022 crop because we were in a drought last year as well. Fortunately, some producers were able to make an additional cutting of hay this fall due to the fall rains that we got. And, it was unseasonably warm as well. And so that helped producers to at least get another hay cutting there with that. So that was a real, I guess, a positive note that helped some ranchers kind of out of that mess with it. Now, the only challenge is, we did see a lot of ranchers in the Central and East Texas plant winter pastures, and we've seen early grazing, but the challenge is we've gotten dry again, and so those pastures are starting to suffer just a little bit. We need some rain to keep those going as well. So I guess the big impacts from a cow herd perspective, we won't know the real impact as far as inventory until we get into the January 1 numbers. And the reduction was not due to death in the cattle. It was reduction in cow numbers from, herd reduction due to the drought. But then also heifer retention continues to be down as well, which with the calf prices that we have, usually when that's triggered and what we've had over the last year, ranchers start keeping heifers and getting ready to produce more babies. And we just did not see that. And the drought is far reaching across the United States as well. So in Texas, we're expecting our numbers to be down, cow numbers to be down again, as we see those January 1 numbers as well. So that's kind of a brief discussion. In the cattle business, the reporting and numbers and production are never as clear as they are in row crops, because ranchers don't like to tell you how many cows they have or how many calves they produce. So that's our challenge. So, but it was this drought is definitely different, as Brianna said. It was kind of a flash drought, and just to kind of again hit on that again, I guess I questioned a little bit of how that drought monitor really represented what was going on the ground, and then how that could influence farmers and ranchers down, from a standpoint of insurance payments and stuff like that. So, but again,
Okay.
there's my contact. Thank you guys very much. If you've got any questions, let me know.
Well, thank you, Jason. John, I already have a question. Please.
Yep, since you were asking about the drought monitor, I was there in the middle of it. During the summer, we were pushing the U.S. drought monitor to go more intense on the drought in the east central Texas, and they were, in our opinion, 1 or 2 categories behind until late August, early September. And the problem was that it had only been dry for a month or 2. And rainfall was near normal at 3 months and 6 months and beyond that. And they look for a variety of indicators showing that there's drought. So I think the thing that we're missing and being provide feedback is getting those reports from producers as to how unusual conditions were and how serious the impacts were compared to what would happen normally or what would happen during a moderate drought. So maybe I can get with you afterwards to see if we can establish a communication channel to be able to get that sort of information into the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I hadn't gone and looked at those drought monitors until this presentation and comparing them. I'm like, man, that's not what was going on. And if you look at just soil conditions and even our reservoir levels or pond levels and stuff, ponds in this area were as low as they were in 2011, and they were full in May. And in 2011, we didn't get any spring rains. So, and again, it was a high evaporation rate of them, but it just, it was a different drought. So, but yeah, I'd be, I think that's an issue, is that accurate representation. So,
Okay, thank you. We are a little behind of